No, I think that's a very good point. Now, look, the moniker Britain's strictest teacher doesn't come lightly, but having read into your career, Katharine, and the way that you instill discipline in your students, I think it's probably fair enough, and I think it's something you should be proud of, actually, that moniker. Explain to me why you think so many modern-day schools have moved away from discipline in the classroom being a guiding principle.
Yeah, well, it's because people see being strict as being mean. And actually, I would say that when you're strict, it's because you love the children and you keep your standards high for them. And children can't possibly learn when other kids are talking. And sometimes, depending on the intake at your school, if you're in a school that has a tough intake, perhaps in the inner city, you're going to have more than just kids talking around you. Kids will be hitting each other, fights will be breaking out, lots of disruption, kids swearing at the teacher, undermining the teacher. And all of that happening is not conducive to learning. It's interesting. Just today, one of my teachers who used to work outside of London, further up north, she was saying to me that when she came to our school and she did her first lesson with a year 8 class and they were doing Romeo and Juliet, and she said to me just today, she said, I really don't think it's any exaggeration to say that one lesson that I taught, we covered more material and learned more in that one lesson than we would have done in an entire half term at my old school. Now, parents will be listening and thinking, well, that's ridiculous. How can that be possible? Even I sort of said, really? Is that really true? And while I know that obviously we cover a lot in our lessons, for her to have said to me, one lesson in comparison to lessons in an entire half term, which is 6 weeks of lessons. And you just think, wow, how is that possible? And of course, one of the big reasons is because our children are so well behaved.
Well,
and
yes,
so
and they have to be, don't they? They have to be, because your rules are very strict. I mean, you're not allowed to utter even a word when you're walking down the corridor between classroom to classroom. I think even if you're a few seconds late to class, you get a detention. I mean, this is a no tolerance policy, right, when it comes to behaviour.
Yeah, and what that means is that the children are just behaving. I mean, so it's not that there are tons people are talking in the corridors, because we've got these silent corridors and people say they're silent, but actually there are teachers everywhere who are saying good morning and good afternoon all the time. So they're sort of silent and they're sort of not. But what isn't happening is children sort of chatting and taking their time to get to lessons. And people might think, well, why do you have to go to be so extreme? Well, the fact is, it means that in a minute and a half, that transition takes place. Children are then learning in their lessons, and they're learning much more than they might do elsewhere because they're in their lessons earlier. Now, you might think, oh, but it's only a difference of a couple of minutes. Not necessarily. In some places, it could take 10, 15 minutes before the corridor is clear and the children are in lessons learning. But not only that, they arrive to the lessons calm and they're ready to learn. Their heads are in it. So again, you don't then spend another 10 minutes in the lesson trying to calm them down and get them focused. So when this teacher of mine says, look, we learned so much in that one lesson in comparison to my last school where it took weeks to learn the same thing, that's part of the reason. Now, it's also our teaching methods that we are very keen on getting through things and getting kids understanding, and the children are able to be engaged. So then there's a culture of children's hands are up all the time. One of the things the guests come, we have 600 visitors that come every year, and they say, wow, there's so many hands up. The children are so engaged with the learning. I've never seen this before. And of course, that drives the learning. So more and more is being covered. More and more the children are interested, and the enthusiasm is sparked.
Yeah.
So far from being the miserable place where children are, it's all strict and sad, really exciting and happy. That's what people don't necessarily understand.